comforting, familiar scents that should have helped me relax, but they could not overcome the anxiety that was coursing through my entire body like electricity. My phone suddenly lit up with a text from yet another unknown number. The blue light illuminated my face in the darkness, casting eerie shadows across the unfamiliar ceiling of Marcus's living room. "I know what Ryan did to you. I have actual proof. Meet me tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Riverside Park by the fountain. Come alone." I stared at that message for what felt like hours, my mind racing through possibilities. Who could this possibly be? Another of Ryan's ex-girlfriends, someone who had witnessed something? Or was this an elaborate trap, with Ryan or one of his friends trying to lure me out into a public place where something bad could happen to me? The possibilities kept me awake until dawn finally began to lighten the sky outside Marcus's windows, painting everything in shades of grey and pink. I showed the mysterious text to Marcus first thing in the morning. "It is definitely a trap," he said immediately without any hesitation. "You absolutely cannot go." He was making coffee in his small kitchen, and the rich aroma was filling the apartment, almost but not quite masking the smell of fear that seemed to cling to me these days, like smoke. "But what if it is not a trap?" I argued, leaning against his kitchen counter and watching as he poured the dark liquid into mismatched mugs. What if someone genuinely does have evidence that could help me? The morning light was streaming through his kitchen window, creating these patterns on the worn linoleum floor that might have been beautiful if I had been in any state of mind to appreciate them. "Then they can simply send that evidence to you directly," Marcus replied logically. "Meeting a complete stranger in a public park after Christina just publicly posted your address and encouraged people to harass you is absolutely insane. No way." He handed me a mug of coffee, his eyes deadly serious with concern. The coffee was hot and strong, exactly the way I liked it, and I realized that Marcus had been paying close attention to these small details about me, learning my preferences and habits. He was right. Of course he was right. But desperation makes you seriously consider options you would normally dismiss immediately without a second thought. I could not go back to my apartment because it was not safe anymore. I could not go to work because I was on forced leave. My entire life was systematically unraveling like a sweater with a pulled thread, and I desperately needed something, anything at all, that could turn the tide in my favor. "I will go with you," David offered immediately when I called him to discuss the situation. "We can scope out the location first and make absolutely sure it is safe before you approach anyone." His voice was calm and practical, offering solutions rather than just pointing out all the potential dangers. Marcus very reluctantly agreed to our plan, but he insisted on coming along too. "Safety in numbers," he said grimly. And then he spent the next hour and a half outlining an extremely detailed plan about where each of us would position ourselves strategically, what specific code words we would use if something seemed off or dangerous, and exactly how long we would wait before approaching the supposed meeting location. The next afternoon, we arrived at Riverside Park a full 45 minutes before the scheduled meeting time. The day was overcast but warm, with heavy clouds threatening rain, and the park was less crowded than usual because of the threatening weather. David positioned himself on a bench that had a completely clear view of the fountain, pretending to be absorbed in reading a book. Marcus and I took a walking path that circled the general area, keeping enough distance to not be obvious but maintaining constant visual contact with David. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a woman approached the fountain. She appeared to be in her late 40s, well dressed in business casual clothing, with an anxious expression on her face as she checked her watch repeatedly and nervously, her fingers constantly fidgeting with her purse strap. Her hair was styled in a neat professional bob, and she wore a light cardigan despite the warm temperature of the day, as if she needed that extra layer for security or comfort. "I do not recognize her at all," I whispered to Marcus as quietly as possible. We were partially hidden behind a large old oak tree, watching from approximately 70 yards away. A young couple with a baby stroller passed between us and the fountain, momentarily blocking our view completely. Me neither, Marcus whispered back. Let us just wait and see who she is actually here to meet. His hand rested lightly on my back, a reassuring presence as we observed the woman with growing curiosity and caution. But nobody else approached the fountain area. After about 12 minutes of waiting, the woman pulled out her phone, frowned deeply at the screen, then sat down heavily on the edge of the fountain. Her shoulders slumped visibly with what looked like disappointment or defeat, and she glanced around the park with increasing frequency, her movements becoming more and more agitated. I think she is the one who texted you, Marcus said thoughtfully. She definitely looks like she is waiting for someone specific. A light drizzle had started falling, tiny droplets catching in my hair and on my eyelashes, making everything look slightly blurred. But the woman made absolutely no move to leave the area or seek any kind of shelter from the rain, which seemed significant somehow. Or she could be bait, I countered, and someone else is watching from somewhere else to see if I actually show up. I carefully scanned the entire surrounding area, looking at the playground equipment to our left, the jogging path that curved to our right, the dense row of trees positioned behind the fountain. Any of those places could easily conceal someone watching and waiting. We debated for another 7 minutes before I finally made a firm decision. I am going to talk to her directly. You two stay back here and watch everything carefully. If anything seems even slightly off or wrong, call me immediately. The rain was falling more steadily now, creating small puddles on the concrete path and darkening the woman's cardigan with spreading moisture. Before Marcus could voice his protest or try to stop me, I started walking toward the fountain, my heart pounding so hard in my ears that it almost drowned out every other sound. Each step felt like it required enormous effort, my legs heavy with fear, but somehow propelled forward by desperate hope for answers. The woman looked up as I approached her position, her eyes widening slightly in recognition, even though we had never met before. "Jamie?" she asked tentatively, her voice soft and uncertain. There was something strangely familiar about her features, something I could not quite place, but that kept nagging at the edges of my memory like a half-remembered dream. I nodded cautiously, keeping what I felt was a safe distance between us. I remained standing while she sat on the fountain edge, giving myself the advantage of height and also a quicker potential escape route if this turned out to be some kind of trap after all. "You wanted to meet me," I stated rather than asked. She glanced around nervously, her hands twisting together in her lap in an anxious gesture that seemed genuine. "Yes, I did. First, I need you to know that I am Ryan's mother, Patricia." The words hit me like an actual physical blow to my chest, and I involuntarily took a step backward. My heart nearly stopped beating. His mother. I could barely get the words out. The resemblance was suddenly crystal clear now that she had identified herself. She had the same exact shape eyes as Ryan, the same slight dimple in her left cheek when she frowned or concentrated. "Please do not leave," she said quickly, clearly seeing the shock and potential flight response in my expression and body language. "I am not here to defend him or make excuses. I am here because I cannot stay silent anymore about what I know." Her voice cracked on that last word, and I saw what appeared to be genuine anguish in her eyes, real pain that seemed impossible to fake. Patricia explained that she had been watching all the videos her son and Christina had been posting online. At first, she admitted with obvious shame, she had believed Ryan's version of events completely, accepted his story that I was unstable and had made false accusations out of spite or mental illness. But then she had found something while she was cleaning out Ryan's old childhood bedroom at her house. Something that changed everything she thought she knew. The rain fell steadily around us as she spoke, creating a curtain of sound that made our conversation feel oddly private, despite being in a very public park. "A journal," she said, her voice trembling noticeably. "Ryan kept a detailed journal during his relationship with you. He wrote extensively about what he did to you, how he carefully planned it, how he actually enjoyed having that power and control. And you were not the first victim. She clutched her purse tighter, her knuckles turning completely white with the pressure. My legs suddenly felt weak and unreliable. I sank down onto the fountain edge, though I made sure to keep significant distance between us. The stone was cold and wet beneath me, but I barely even noticed the discomfort. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Why would you betray your own son?" The sound of the fountain's water mixing with the rainfall created this constant white noise around us that felt surreal. "Because what he is doing to you right now is fundamentally wrong," she said with conviction. "What he did to those other women was wrong. I have enabled his behavior for far too long, making excuses for him, believing his lies, protecting him from consequences. I cannot do it anymore. I cannot live with myself if I stay silent." Her face showed the tremendous weight of her guilt, with lines of genuine sorrow etched deeply around her eyes and mouth. She reached into her expensive leather purse and pulled out a small black notebook that was worn at the edges from use. "Here," she said, holding it out to me. "It is all documented in here. Pages 58 through 84 are about you specifically, written in his own handwriting." The journal was slightly damp from the rain, its dark cover slick with moisture. I stared at the notebook, genuinely afraid to touch it, as if it might burn my hands. "Why would you give this to me? He is your son, your only child." A raindrop fell from my hair onto my cheek, mimicking a tear that I was too shocked to actually shed. Patricia's eyes filled with real tears that started spilling down her cheeks. "Because I failed completely as a mother," she said, her voice breaking. "I did not raise him to become this person, and I absolutely cannot let him destroy another young woman's life the way he has destroyed so many others." Her voice broke completely on that last sentence, and she covered her mouth with her hand, trying desperately to compose herself and not break down completely. I took the notebook with hands that would not stop shaking. "Have you read all of it?" I asked. The cover felt smooth and cool against my palm, so innocuous looking for something that apparently contained such darkness and evil. She nodded, looking deeply ashamed. "Yes, I have read every page. It is absolutely disturbing and horrifying. He needs serious professional help, psychiatric intervention, and you desperately need protection from him and what he is capable of." She stood up slowly, adjusting her purse strap on her shoulder with shaking hands. "I have made an appointment with a lawyer for tomorrow morning. I am going to make a formal legal statement about finding this journal and what it contains. It will not undo what he has already done to you and the others, but maybe it will help stop what he is doing right now." As Patricia walked away across the wet grass, Marcus and David immediately rushed over to where I was sitting. I showed them the journal, and we flipped through it together right there in the park, huddled under the branches of a large tree for some shelter from the rain. What we found documented in those pages was absolutely sickening and depraved. Ryan had meticulously documented his abuse of multiple women, not out of any sense of guilt or remorse, but as some kind of sick trophy collection, a record of his conquests and victories. He described in cold, clinical detail how he had systematically isolated me from my support system, manipulated my emotions and perceptions, hurt me both physically and emotionally, and he had done precisely the same things to several others before me. The pages were filled with his neat, precise handwriting, detailing incidents that I had tried so desperately hard to forget and move past. The time he had claimed to accidentally spill scalding hot coffee on my lap when I had tried to leave during an argument, but the journal revealed it was completely deliberate. The night he had gripped my wrist so tightly that deep bruises formed, then somehow convinced me I had done it to myself while sleeping, making me question my own memory and sanity. The calculated, strategic way he had systematically turned my friends against me, telling them individually that I was becoming unstable and needed space. that I was saying terrible things about them behind their backs. Most disturbing of all were the recent entries specifically about Christina. He was not dating her because he had any genuine feelings or cared about her as a person. He was deliberately using her as a weapon against me, a tool to cause maximum damage. Christina is absolutely perfect for this, he had written in his neat script, so desperate for male attention and validation that she will do literally anything I ask without question. Once I am finished destroying Jamie completely, I will break Christina in exactly the same way. The words were chilling in their calculated cruelty, written with the same detached, analytical tone someone might use to describe a business strategy or chess game. "We need to take this directly to the police immediately," Marcus said with urgency. The rain had plastered his hair flat against his forehead, but he did not seem to notice or care at all. His focus was entirely on the journal and what it meant for our case. But I found myself hesitating despite how damning the evidence was. What if they do not believe it is actually real? I worried aloud. What if they think I wrote it myself or had someone else write it to frame him? The fear that had become my constant companion over these past weeks surged again, whispering all the potential ways this could still go horribly wrong. "It is in Ryan's handwriting," David pointed out reasonably. "And his mother can testify under oath that she personally found it in his bedroom in her house." He had opened his jacket to shield the precious journal from the rain, protecting what might be the evidence that could finally vindicate me and prove my truth. Would she really testify against her own son, though? I asked, voicing my doubt. Would she actually follow through when it comes down to it, or will she change her mind and protect him? The question hung heavy in the air between us, as substantial as the rain clouds overhead. We made the decision to scan every single page of the journal first, creating detailed digital backups that could not be lost or destroyed. Then David, who had a friend working in the police department, arranged for us to meet with a detective who specialized specifically in domestic violence cases and had a reputation for actually believing victims. The rain had finally stopped by the time we reached the police station, but large puddles dotted the parking lot, reflecting the grey sky above like mirrors. Detective Williams was a stern-faced woman in her mid-50s, with kind eyes that had seen too much suffering. She listened extremely carefully as I explained the entire situation from beginning to end, taking detailed notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions that showed she was really paying attention. Her office was small but impeccably organized, with file folders stacked neatly on her desk and various domestic violence resource posters covering the walls. When I showed her Ryan's journal, her expression darkened considerably. "This is extremely concerning," she said seriously, her voice heavy with the weight of what she was reading. Not just the documented abuse itself, but the current ongoing harassment campaign and the fact that he is now doing this to another woman. The doxing alone is potentially criminal under our state laws. She flipped slowly through the journal, her frown deepening with each page she read. "So you can actually help us?" I asked, trying desperately not to sound too hopeful or desperate. My hands were clasped so tightly in my lap to keep them from shaking that my nails were digging painful crescents into my palms. "We can certainly investigate this thoroughly," she said carefully, choosing her words with obvious care. "But I want to be completely honest with you about the reality of the situation. Cases like this are legally complicated. The journal is definitely compelling evidence, but we would need his mother to officially confirm its authenticity, and even then, it might not be sufficient for criminal charges without additional corroborating evidence." The harsh fluorescent lights of her office cast unflattering shadows, highlighting every line of concern on her face. My heart sank hearing those words. "So there is actually nothing you can do to stop them," I said, the familiar feeling of helplessness threatening to completely overwhelm me again. The brief flicker of hope I had felt when finding the journal was already starting to fade away like morning mist. "I did not say that at all," Detective Williams replied firmly. We can start by issuing an official cease and desist order regarding the harassment campaign, and I can definitely help you file for restraining orders against both Ryan and Christina based on the doxing incident and the ongoing threats. She pulled out some official forms from her desk drawer, her movements efficient and purposeful, like someone who had done this many times before. It was not everything I had desperately hoped for, not the immediate justice and vindication I craved, but it was something tangible, a concrete step forward. As we left the police station and walked to Marcus's car, I felt this strange, confusing mix of emotions swirling inside me. Relief that someone in an official position of authority was finally taking me seriously and believing my story, but also frustration that justice still seemed so far away, so difficult to actually achieve. The sky had cleared somewhat, with patches of blue appearing between the clouds, which somehow felt symbolic, like maybe things were starting to improve just slightly. "What happens now?" I asked Marcus as we walked across the parking lot. The asphalt was still wet from the earlier rain, puddles reflecting our images as we passed by them. "Now we use everything we have," Marcus said with determination. "The journal, the restraining orders, all the testimonies from Ryan's other victims. We build our case piece by piece, bit by bit, until it is undeniable." His confidence was genuinely reassuring, a solid, steady presence beside me when absolutely everything else in my life felt uncertain and unstable. But of course, Ryan and Christina were not going to make any of this easy for us. The very next day, they escalated their campaign yet again in response. Christina posted this tearful, dramatic video claiming that she had been receiving death threats from people she claimed were my supporters. She showed carefully edited screenshots of threatening messages, but she had very deliberately edited out any identifying usernames that could be verified or traced. The video was filmed in what appeared to be her bedroom, with soft, flattering lighting and strategically placed decorative pillows, creating a backdrop that made her look vulnerable and innocent and sympathetic. "I am literally shaking right now," she sobbed into the camera, her mascara artfully smudged in a way that looked almost too perfect to be accidental. "All because I stood by someone I love who was falsely accused of terrible things. Is this really what feminism has come to? Women viciously attacking other women just for supporting men?" She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her hand trembling just enough to be noticeable, but not so much that it seemed fake. The comments section was absolutely flooded with sympathy and outrage on her behalf. The hashtag #IStandWithChristina started trending nationally on Twitter within hours. People who had never met either of us, who knew absolutely nothing about the real situation, were taking sides in a battle based entirely on carefully crafted performances, rather than actual facts. The online world had become a jury passing judgment based on who could tell the most compelling emotional story. And then came what felt like the final devastating blow. Christina had somehow managed to get hold of an old voicemail I had left for my therapist during a particularly dark and difficult period after my breakup with Ryan. I later learned through Detective Williams that Ryan had once borrowed my phone to make a call during our relationship, claiming his battery had died. He must have saved my therapist's number then, and later used it to social engineer his way into accessing my confidential therapy records, probably by pretending to be a concerned family member or using some other manipulation. In that voicemail, which was never meant for anyone's ears except my therapist, I had talked about having suicidal thoughts, about feeling like absolutely no one would ever believe me, about the crushing hopelessness that had consumed me. It had been a moment of raw, unfiltered vulnerability meant only for the ears of the one person I trusted to help me through my absolute darkest time. The recording was slightly distorted, my voice thick with tears as I described the despair that had nearly destroyed me. Christina posted it with a caption that read, "Listen to the unstable voice of someone who would make false accusations. This is exactly what severe mental illness sounds like. Pray for Jamie to get the help she desperately needs." The violation was so profound, so deeply personal, that I could not even cry about it anymore. I just sat there on Marcus's couch, staring blankly at the wall, feeling something essential inside me break into pieces. The living room was quiet, except for the sound of my breathing, which seemed too loud, too ragged and uneven. Outside, normal life continued with people walking by on the sidewalk, cars passing, birds singing in the trees. Everyone completely oblivious to the fact that my most private moment of vulnerability had just been weaponized and exposed to the entire world. "That is it," Marcus said, his voice actually shaking with rage that I had never heard from him before. "This ends right now." He was pacing again with heavy, purposeful footsteps, his hands clenched into tight fists at his sides. He immediately called David, who came over within minutes, and together with Sarah, Jennifer, Michelle, and Laura, all of Ryan's other victims who had agreed to help me, we formed what David jokingly called the Justice League, though there was nothing funny about our mission. The nickname brought a brief, fleeting smile to my face despite everything, the first time I had smiled in days. Our plan was relatively simple in concept, but risky in execution. We would create our own coordinated social media campaign, but instead of directly attacking Ryan and Christina or engaging with their lies, we would focus on sharing educational resources about domestic violence, gaslighting techniques, and post-separation abuse. We would talk about our own experiences without naming specific names, using popular hashtags that would reach the same audiences Christina was targeting. And most importantly, we would strategically leak carefully selected pages from Ryan's journal, the ones that clearly showed his pattern of abuse, without revealing the most deeply personal and private details of what he had done to each of us individually. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" Sarah asked me, her eyes concerned but determined. We were all gathered in Marcus's living room, laptops open, strategy notes spread across every available surface. "Once we do this, there is no going back to how things were. They will escalate even further than they already have." "I am completely sure," I said, finally finding my voice and my strength again. "I am done being afraid of them. I am done letting them control every aspect of the narrative." The words came out stronger and more confident than I had expected, surprising even me with their conviction. We launched our campaign early the next morning. Jennifer, who had professional experience working in marketing and social media, helped us craft messages that were clear, concise, and impossible to dismiss as the ravings of a crazy person. Laura, who had built up a substantial following on her beauty and lifestyle blog over the years, shared her story first, talking about an unnamed ex-boyfriend who had threatened her with revenge adult films when she tried to leave the relationship. Sarah posted next, describing in careful detail the isolation tactics her former boyfriend had used, how he had systematically cut her off from every friend and family member who might have helped her escape. And I shared last, posting a single page from Ryan's journal where he coldly described his systematic approach to breaking down a woman's self-esteem and sense of reality, making her doubt her own perceptions and memories. The response was immediate and absolutely overwhelming in the best possible way. Women from all over the country began sharing their own stories of abuse and gaslighting and manipulation. Domestic violence advocates and organizations reached out offering support and resources and amplification of our message. And most surprisingly, several of Ryan's male friends contacted me privately to say that they had always suspected something was deeply wrong about him, that they had witnessed concerning behavior but had not known how to address it or had been afraid to speak up. One sent screenshots of disturbing texts Ryan had sent about teaching me a lesson and putting me in my place. Another described witnessing Ryan's explosive, disproportionate anger over minor trivial issues that did not warrant that level of response. Pieces of a puzzle were coming together, creating a picture that others could finally see clearly. For the first time in this entire nightmare, the tide actually seemed to be turning in our favor. But Ryan and Christina were definitely not going down without a serious fight. That evening, while I was helping Marcus make dinner in his kitchen, trying to find some normalcy in the routine of cooking, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment and all common sense, I answered it. The kitchen was warm and filled with the comforting smell of the pasta sauce Marcus was stirring on the stove, creating an incongruous backdrop for what was about to happen. "Hello," I said, balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder as I chopped vegetables for a salad. The knife hit the cutting board with a rhythmic sound that was almost meditative. "You think you are so incredibly clever, do you not?" Christina's voice came through the line, and all pretense of the tearful, vulnerable victim was completely gone, replaced by pure venom, turning people against us with your pathetic little pity party campaign. The hatred in her voice was actually startling after weeks of watching her carefully cultivated online persona of the supportive, suffering girlfriend. "I am just telling the truth, Christina," I said as calmly as I could manage. "Something you should seriously try sometime." I carefully set down the knife, my appetite suddenly completely gone, despite the delicious smells filling the kitchen. Marcus looked up from the stove with a questioning expression on his face, clearly picking up on the tension in my voice and body language. She laughed, but it was a harsh sound with absolutely no humor in it whatsoever. "The truth," she repeated mockingly. "You would not recognize the truth if it physically slapped you across your face. And trust me when I say this, reality is about to hit you harder than you can possibly imagine." The threat was absolutely unmistakable, crystal clear, sending a genuine chill down my spine despite the warmth of the kitchen. "Is that a threat, Christina?" I asked directly. I moved away from Marcus, not wanting him to hear her words and become even more worried than he already was about my safety. "It is a promise," she said coldly. "You have absolutely no idea what is coming for you, what we have planned." Before I could respond or ask what she meant, she abruptly hung up, leaving me standing there staring at my phone with genuine fear coursing through my body. "What was that all about?" Marcus asked with concern, noticing my pale face and shaking hands. He turned down the heat under the sauce, giving me his complete attention. "That was Christina," I told him. "She is planning something new, something bad." The kitchen suddenly felt much less safe, much less warm, as if her threat had physically entered the space with us and poisoned the atmosphere. We did not have to wait long at all to find out exactly what Christina had been threatening. The very next morning, I woke up to discover the hashtag Jamie is overparty trending nationally on Twitter. Vanessa had orchestrated a sophisticated, coordinated attack, having her numerous followers mass report all of my social media accounts for harassment and threatening behavior. My Instagram account was temporarily suspended pending review. My Twitter account was locked for violating community guidelines. Even my professional LinkedIn account, which I barely used, had been flagged for investigation. In one swift, coordinated move, she had effectively silenced my voice just as people were finally starting to listen to my story and believe me. But Christina did not stop there, not even close. Someone, and I had absolutely no doubt about who was responsible, had sent an anonymous tip to my landlord, claiming that I was running an illegal business from my apartment. When I called him to explain and defend myself, he seemed skeptical and cold, mentioning that he had also received multiple complaints about excessive noise and concerning erratic behavior from me. His voice was cold and distant, nothing at all like the friendly, warm tone he had used when I first moved into the building 2 years ago. "I have never received a single complaint before now," I protested desperately. The phone felt slippery in my sweaty palm as panic began to truly take hold. My apartment was the only safe space I had left in my life, and now even that sanctuary was being threatened and taken away. "Well, I have received 7 separate complaints in just the past week," he replied stiffly. "I am going to need to conduct a thorough inspection of your unit." The implication was crystal clear in his tone. He was actively looking for any reason, any excuse to evict me and get me out of the building. It was a coordinated, systematic effort to isolate me completely from any support or stability, cut off my social media presence so I could not defend myself publicly, threaten my housing so I had nowhere safe to go. They had already taken away my job temporarily. They were methodically trying to erase me from existence, to make me so desperate and broken that I would just back down and disappear. The walls felt like they were physically closing in on me, options disappearing one by one, just exactly as Ryan had done during our relationship when he wanted to maintain control. But Ryan and Christina had made a critical miscalculation, because this time I was not alone in fighting back. When I told our Justice League group what was happening, they immediately sprang into action without hesitation. David helped me set up entirely new social media accounts under slightly different variations of my name. Jennifer used her extensive marketing contacts to get my Instagram suspension reviewed by an actual human rather than just an algorithm. Laura offered to let me stay with her for as long as I needed if I ended up losing my apartment. And Marcus, wonderful, loyal Marcus, never left my side for even a moment. "We are going to get through this together," he promised, his arm wrapped protectively around my shoulders as we sat on his couch, strategizing our next moves and planning how to fight back. "They think they can break you, but they have no idea how strong you actually are, how strong you have had to become." His words were simple but incredibly powerful, a reminder that I had already survived Ryan once before and could absolutely do it again. I leaned against him, physically and emotionally exhausted but still determined. "I just do not understand why Christina hates me so much," I said quietly. "What did I possibly do to her to deserve this level of hatred and cruelty?" The question had been bothering me constantly for weeks now. The intensity of her animosity seemed completely disproportionate to our relatively brief interaction and relationship. "Nothing," Marcus said with absolute conviction. "This is not about you at all. It is entirely about her own deep insecurities and self-hatred, and Ryan is deliberately using and manipulating that for his own purposes." His insight made perfect sense when I really thought about it. Christina's behavior had always been fundamentally about her desperate need for attention and validation, her fear of being overlooked or considered less than other women. I thought about the journal entries where Ryan had coldly described Christina as a tool to be used and then discarded once she had served her purpose. As much as Christina had hurt me, as much damage as she had done to my life, I could not help feeling a genuine twinge of concern for her. She had absolutely no idea what was coming for her once Ryan was finished using her and decided to move on to his next victim. The cycle of abuse was so painfully clear from the outside looking in, yet so impossible to see when you were caught in the middle of it yourself. "Maybe we should try to talk to Christina directly," I suggested slowly. The idea formed gradually as I considered the situation. Show her the specific journal entries about her, the ones where Ryan describes his plans. Let her see what he really thinks of her. Tyrese looked deeply skeptical about this plan. "You genuinely think she would listen to anything you have to say at this point?" he asked. His doubt was completely reasonable, given everything that had happened. Christina had shown absolutely no willingness to hear my side of things so far. "Probably not," I admitted honestly, "but I have to at least try. Otherwise, I am no better than them, using her as a pawn in this twisted game without caring about what happens to her." The realization felt important somehow. Maintaining my humanity and capacity for empathy, even towards someone who had shown me none whatsoever, was a way of ensuring that Ryan had not succeeded in breaking something essential and good inside me. We carefully debated the best approach for reaching out to Christina. A direct message would almost certainly be ignored or immediately used against me somehow. A public post would inevitably seem like an attack and make things worse. Finally, we decided on using a neutral third party, someone Christina might actually listen to and trust. The solution was not perfect, but it seemed like the best option available to us given the circumstances. There was one guy named Kevin who had remained carefully on the periphery of all the drama, deliberately not taking sides publicly, but also not cutting me off completely or joining in the attacks against me. He and Christina had been casual friends before all of this started, and she still occasionally commented on his social media posts with friendly messages. I called Kevin, carefully explained what we had found in Ryan's journal, and asked if he would be willing to talk to Christina on my behalf. My hands shook slightly as I made the call, afraid of yet another rejection, another door closing in my face. "I do not know about this, Jamie," Kevin said hesitantly. "This whole situation is really incredibly messed up and complicated. I honestly do not want to get more deeply involved than I already am." His reluctance was obvious in his voice, the natural caution of someone who desperately wanted to avoid being dragged into an ugly conflict. "I completely understand your hesitation," I said sincerely, trying to hide my disappointment. "I just thought that if Christina knew what Ryan was really planning for her future, what he has written about her." I deliberately let the sentence trail off and hang in the air, hoping Kevin would fill in the blank himself and understand the implications. There was a long pause where I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. "Send me those specific journal pages," he finally said with resignation. "I will think about it seriously." It was not a firm commitment, but it was something, a small crack of possibility in what had felt like an impenetrable wall. It was not much, but it represented hope. I sent Kevin the scanned pages where Ryan had described in cold detail his plans for Christina after he was finished using her against me. Then I waited, trying desperately not to get my hopes up too high. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness, each notification on my phone making my heart race before I realized it was not from Kevin. 3 days later, Kevin finally called me back. I talked to her, he said without any preamble or small talk. His voice was subdued, serious in a way I had not heard from him before. "And?" I asked, holding my breath, afraid to hope but completely unable to stop myself. "She did not believe me at first," Kevin explained. "She insisted that the journal was probably fake, something you had created to frame Ryan. But then I told her about something specific that Ryan had written that I had not mentioned to her before. A particular gift he was planning to give her. A bracelet with a phoenix charm. Apparently, he had just given her that exact bracelet the day before yesterday, with this whole speech about rising from the ashes together that was word for word what he had written in the journal weeks ago. The coincidence was far too specific to be dismissed as chance. "Did that convince her?" I asked urgently, pacing Marcus's living room while talking on the phone. Outside, the afternoon sun was setting, casting long shadows through the windows. "I think it genuinely shook her," Kevin said carefully. She got really quiet for a long time, asked to see the actual journal pages for herself. I sent them to her and she just completely disappeared, has not responded to any of my messages or calls since then. Real concern edged into his voice now, not just for me, but for Christina too. I did not know whether I should feel hopeful or worried about Christina's reaction and sudden silence. Had she finally seen the truth about Ryan, or was she planning some new form of retaliation against me that would be even worse than before? The uncertainty was almost more difficult to handle than knowing for sure that another attack was definitely coming. The answer came that evening in the form of a text message from an unknown number that appeared on my phone screen. "We need to talk in person, just you and me, no Marcus, no Ryan. Tomorrow at 4 in the afternoon, coffee shop on Maple Street downtown." The message was brief and direct, leaving absolutely no doubt about who had sent it, even though there was no signature. I showed the text to Marcus immediately. "It has to be Christina," he said, reading it several times with a furrowed brow. "But it could easily be a trap. Ryan could have her phone. He could be setting you up." His protective instincts were in full force, his entire body tense with concern for my safety. "I have to take this chance," I insisted. "This might be our only real opportunity to end this nightmare once and for all." The possibility of finally resolving the situation, of being free from the constant attacks and fear, was too tempting to ignore even if it was risky. We argued about the plan for hours, going back and forth. Marcus absolutely insisted on coming with me, positioning himself outside the coffee shop as backup in case something went wrong. I finally agreed, but only on the condition that he would not interfere or come inside unless I texted him a specific agreed-upon code word. We settled on pineapple as our safe word, random enough that I would never use it accidentally in normal conversation. The next day, I arrived at the coffee shop a full 20 minutes early, deliberately choosing a table with a completely clear view of both the main entrance and the emergency exit at the back. My hands were sweating nervously as I ordered a latte that I knew I probably would not actually drink. The coffee shop was moderately busy with customers, filled with the pleasant hum of conversations and the hissing sound of the espresso machine creating useful background noise. No one would be able to overhear our conversation even if they tried. At exactly 4 o'clock, Christina walked through the door. She looked noticeably different, smaller somehow, diminished, without her usual confident swagger and commanding presence. Her eyes were obviously red and swollen from crying, her normally perfect makeup was slightly smudged and hastily applied, and there were dark circles under her eyes that concealer had not quite managed to hide. The designer outfit and carefully styled hair were still there, all the external trappings of her usual appearance, but something absolutely essential had changed fundamentally. It was as if the frame remained intact, but the picture inside had been completely altered. She sat down across from me without saying a word, just staring down at the table between us as if she could not bring herself to make eye contact. The silence stretched uncomfortably between us, broken only by the ambient noise of the coffee shop around us, the sound of cups clinking together, the bell over the door jingling as customers came and went, soft jazz music playing from the overhead speakers. "Thank you for coming," I said finally, breaking the oppressive silence. My voice came out steadier than I had expected, given how rapidly my heart was pounding against my ribs. She looked up slowly, her expression completely unreadable. "I did not come here for you," she said bluntly. "I came for myself, for my own sake." The words were clipped and defensive, but they lacked the sharp venom I had grown accustomed to hearing in her voice over these past weeks. "Okay," I said carefully, trying not to say anything that might make her leave. "What do you want to talk about?" I kept my hands wrapped around my coffee cup, more for something to hold on to than any actual desire to drink it. Christina took a deep breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. "I want to know if it is actually true, all the things written in that journal. Did Ryan really do those horrible things to you?" Her voice wavered noticeably on the question, betraying the emotion she was desperately trying to keep hidden and controlled. I met her gaze directly and held it. "Yes," I said simply. "All of it is true, every single word, and worse things that are not even written there. The simple truth, stated plainly without any embellishment or dramatic flair, seemed to hit her even harder than any emotional appeal possibly could have. She physically flinched. And the other women," she continued, "Sarah and Jennifer and Michelle and Laura." Her fingers were tracing these nervous patterns on the table surface, her perfectly manicured nails catching and reflecting the light from the window beside us. "Yes," I confirmed, "they are all telling the complete truth about what he did to them. Every single one." I watched her face extremely carefully, looking for any sign that she might be secretly recording this conversation or somehow setting me up. But all I could see was genuine confusion and the slow, painful dawning of a terrible realization. Christina was silent for a very long moment, her fingers continuing to trace invisible patterns on the wooden table. "He has been different lately," she finally admitted quietly. "Ever since we started making all those videos together, more controlling than before, constantly checking my phone and demanding to know who I am talking to, getting angry over tiny little things that should not matter. The admission seemed to cost her tremendous effort, each word dragged out reluctantly from somewhere deep inside. My heart genuinely ached for her, despite absolutely everything she had done to me, all the pain she had deliberately caused. I recognized those signs far too well from my own experience. The gradual escalation of control, the increasing unpredictability of his anger, the constant monitoring, all classic hallmarks of the abusive pattern I had lived through myself. "Christina, you need to get away from him immediately," I said with real urgency. "Right now, before his behavior gets progressively worse and more dangerous." She laughed, but it was a bitter, hollow sound with no joy in it. "And go where exactly?" she asked. "Back to the friend group that hates me now because of everything I have done. Back to my parents who think I am this successful social media influencer dating a great guy with a promising future. I literally have nowhere to go and no one to turn to." The desperation in her voice was painfully familiar, an echo of my own trapped feelings when I had been trying to leave Ryan. "That is exactly what he wants you to believe," I said gently but firmly. "That is precisely how it starts. He systematically isolates you until you genuinely believe you have no options left, no way out." I leaned forward slightly, trying to convey the urgency without frightening her away. "But you absolutely do have options. There are resources available, people who can and will help you if you let them." Tears welled up in Christina's eyes and started spilling down her cheeks, cutting tracks through her makeup. "I did not know," she whispered, her voice breaking. "About what he did to you?" "Not really, not the truth. He told me you were mentally unstable, that you had made everything up out of spite. And I wanted so desperately to believe him because," she trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the sentence. "Because you were jealous," I finished for her quietly. "Because you thought the guys in our friend group liked me better than they liked you." The realization was not new to me, but somehow hearing it finally acknowledged out loud felt significant and meaningful. She nodded miserably, more tears falling. "It is so stupid and petty and immature," she said. "And now I have completely ruined your entire life for absolutely nothing, for my own insecurities." Her mascara was smudging badly now as she wiped at her eyes with a paper napkin, creating these dark streaks across her face. "Not for nothing," I said, and I meant it. "You did it because Ryan deliberately manipulated you, just like he manipulated me and every other woman he has been with. That is what he does. That is his pattern. It is what he is good at." I offered her a clean napkin from the metal dispenser on the table, a small gesture of kindness that seemed to surprise her. Christina wiped her eyes, and suddenly her expression shifted, becoming more determined and resolved. "I want to fix this somehow," she said firmly. "I want to tell the truth publicly. I want to help you." Her chin lifted slightly, a glimpse of real strength emerging through all the vulnerability and pain. I stared at her, hardly daring to believe what I was hearing. "You would actually do that?" I asked carefully. "Publicly admit everything, take down all those videos and posts?" The possibility seemed too good to be true after weeks of relentless attacks. "Yes," she said with conviction. "I will take down every single video I posted. I will post the actual truth about everything. I will even go to the police station with you if you want me to." Her hands stopped their nervous fidgeting and settled flat on the table with new resolve and purpose. It was so much more than I had dared to hope for. But as I looked at Christina really carefully, truly looked at her, I noticed something that made me pause and reconsider everything. There was a faint but visible bruise on her wrist, partially covered and hidden by her bracelet. The same kind of bruise I used to hide with jewelry and long sleeves. The discoloration was subtle, a yellowish-purple color, maybe 3 or 4 days old, but absolutely unmistakable to someone who knew exactly what to look for. "Christina," I said very carefully, keeping my voice low and gentle. "Has Ryan hurt you? Physically hurt you, I mean?" I was acutely aware of the other customers around us, the barista wiping down the counter just a few feet away. Her eyes widened with what looked like genuine fear, and for a moment I thought she would deny it completely. Then her entire face just crumpled. "Just once," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Last night when I confronted him about the journal and what it said, he told me I was being crazy and paranoid, that I was turning against him just like you did. He grabbed my wrist so hard I genuinely thought he was going to break the bones." She pulled back her bracelet slowly, revealing the full extent of the bruising. The distinct finger marks were clearly visible against her skin, dark purple impressions that told a story of violence and control. In that single moment, everything fundamentally changed between us. Christina was not just my tormentor anymore, not just the person who had tried to destroy my life. She was Ryan's newest victim, caught in the same trap I had barely escaped from. And no matter what she had done to me, regardless of all the pain she had caused, I absolutely could not leave her trapped in his clutches, could not abandon her to face what I knew was coming. The cycle had to stop, even if it meant helping someone who had actively tried to ruin me. "Listen to me very carefully," I said, leaning forward and speaking with quiet intensity. "You are not going back to him. Not tonight, not ever again. Do you understand me?" My voice was firm but gentle, the same tone I desperately wish someone had used with me when I was trying to leave Ryan, when I needed someone to tell me clearly that I deserved better. She nodded, looking simultaneously terrified and relieved. "But where will I go?" she asked desperately. "What am I supposed to do?" The questions came in a rush, the practical concerns of someone contemplating a major life change without any preparation or planning. "First, we are going to thoroughly document that bruise with photographs," I said, immediately slipping into the practical survival mode I had developed after my own escape from Ryan. "Then we are going to call Detective Williams and file a report. And then you are going to stay with Laura, one of Ryan's other ex-girlfriends, until we figure out the next steps." The plan formed as I spoke, each piece falling logically into place with surprising clarity. For the first time since this entire nightmare began months ago, I felt this strong sense of clarity and purpose flowing through me. This was not just about clearing my name anymore or getting justice for myself. This had become about stopping Ryan completely and permanently, once and for all, before he could hurt anyone else the way he had hurt so many of us. The coffee shop continued its normal rhythm around us, people chatting casually, ordering drinks, tapping on laptops, going about their ordinary day completely unaware that at our corner table something profound and significant was happening. As we left the coffee shop together, Marcus watching in absolute amazement from his car parked across the street, I realized something truly important. The path to justice was not going to be some dramatic cinematic showdown or a viral video exposing the complete truth. It was going to be exactly this, one small step at a time, one truth spoken at a time. One survivor reaching out to help and support another. Christina looked at me as we walked together toward Marcus's car, the afternoon sun highlighting the exhaustion and strain visible in her face. "Why are you helping me after absolutely everything I did to you?" she asked, her question genuine and filled with confusion. I thought carefully about my answer for a moment. "Because no one deserves what Ryan does to people," I said honestly, "not even you. And maybe especially not you, because you did not fully understand what you were getting into." She gave me this small, sad smile. "I do not deserve your forgiveness or your kindness." Her shoulders were hunched slightly, as if she was trying to make herself smaller, less visible. "This is not about forgiveness," I said, and I meant every word. "This is about breaking the cycle of abuse. It is about being better than them, better than what they tried to turn us into." And as I said it, I realized it was absolutely true. This was not about being a saint or taking some kind of moral high ground. It was about refusing to let Ryan's poison spread any further, about maintaining my humanity and capacity for compassion, even towards someone who had shown me none. It was about ensuring that Ryan had not succeeded in breaking something essential and good inside me. As Marcus drove us to the police station, I felt something I had not experienced in months. Real, substantial hope that this nightmare might finally be ending. The city passed by outside the car windows, people walking dogs in the park, children playing on playgrounds, joggers running along the sidewalks, life continuing in all its ordinary, beautiful normalcy. And for the first time in a very long while, I felt like I might actually have a legitimate place in that ordinary world again. The road ahead would still be genuinely difficult, I knew that. There would be official statements to give to the police, evidence to present and organise, inevitable social media fallout to manage and deal with. Christina would have to publicly retract all her accusations, which would bring its own wave of backlash and criticism from people who had believed her performance. Ryan would almost certainly fight back, possibly even harder and more viciously than before. The legal system might still fail us the way it fails so many victims of domestic violence every single day. But for the first time, I was not facing any of it alone. I had Marcus and David, who had never wavered in their support. I had Sarah and Jennifer and Michelle and Laura, all of us connected by shared trauma, but also by shared strength and determination. And now, improbably and unexpectedly, I had Christina too. The alliance was admittedly fragile, built on shared trauma rather than genuine friendship or trust. But it was real, and it was powerful in its own way. Sometimes justice is not loud and dramatic. It does not announce itself with sirens and handcuffs and dramatic arrests. Sometimes it is quiet and gradual. It is a conversation in a coffee shop where truth is finally spoken. It is a truth that has been buried finally coming to light. It is a hand extended to someone who absolutely does not deserve it, but desperately needs it anyway. Sometimes healing begins not with grand dramatic gestures, but with small acts of everyday courage. The courage to speak up when it is terrifying. The courage to listen even when you do not want to hear it. The courage to believe someone when society tells you not to. The courage to help even when you have been hurt. As we pulled into the police station parking lot, I took a deep breath and felt my lungs expand fully. This was just the beginning of the end of this chapter, not the final resolution. But it was a beginning, a real tangible start. And after everything I had been through, after all the pain and fear and uncertainty, that was enough. That was more than enough. It was everything.